Research shows that endocrine disruptors may pose the greatest risk during prenatal and early postnatal development, even though the negative effects of that exposure may not be experienced until much later in life. All of the chemicals that I explore in detail in The Body Toxic are known endocrine disrupting substances. So the evidence is only getting stronger that hormone disrupting chemicals are a health threat. And earlier this summer, a group of doctors known as the Endocrine Society did something unprecedented in this group's 93-year history. It issued a scientific statement that warned the medical community and policymakers about chemicals such as bisphenol A. The Endocrine Society concluded that the evidence of adverse reproductive outcomes, such as infertility, cancers, and malformations, is strong. Now, the Endocrine Society is about as far away as you could get from a bunch of radical environmentalists and mommy bloggers, and they also said that there is mounting evidence for effects on the thyroid, brain, and obesity. And they pointed out another important concern. These chemicals not only affect the exposed individual, but they also impact generations through changes that affect gene expression. And I'm going to explain that in a couple minutes here too. So let's step back for a moment and think about how these chemicals are used and how we're exposed to them daily. How many of you in this room had heard about bisphenol A before you came here tonight? Okay. Well, I'm just going to do a review for those of you who know and tell you a little bit about this chemical for those of you who haven't heard about it before. It's the starting material for polycarbonate plastic, which is used to make an array of products, including baby bottles and sport water bottles and eyeglass lenses and bicycle helmets and dental sealants and some medical devices. BPA is also used in the resin that line food cans and soda cans. And in the past 12 months, as I mentioned earlier, certain uses of bisphenol A have been banned in Minnesota, Connecticut, the city of Chicago, 3 New York State counties, and all of Canada. And mainly the bans pertain to products intended for children. Bisphenol A is one of the highest production chemicals in the world. Globally, every year, about 6 billion pounds are made. And BPA leaches from packaging and containers into our food and drinks, and mainly that's how humans are exposed. From dozens of laboratory studies and early epidemiological studies, we know that BPA is linked to prostate and breast cancer, urogenital abnormalities in male babies, a decline in semen quality, early onset puberty in girls, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and neurobehavioral problems such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. BPA is suspected of causing an array of diseases as a result of an exposure occurring during fetal development when a gene becomes inappropriately modified. In my book, I talk in detail about the work of a woman named Pat Hunt at Washington State University. And she discovered that bisphenol A disrupts early egg development in mouse fetuses, or mice fetuses, I'm not sure which is right there. Like all mammals, female mice form their eggs while still in their mother's womb. So not only is the fetus exposed, but so are eggs that will produce the next generation. And this is called a transgenerational effect. What Pat Hunt found is that animals exposed to bisphenol A in utero had embryos with abnormal chromosomes. And so what she told me is that by hitting the mother with a low dose, we increased the likelihood the grandchildren would be abnormal. So I want to read a few paragraphs now that capture the dilemma that consumers are faced with regarding bisphenol A. As a mom and a scientist who researches bisphenol A, Rebecca Roberts finds herself doing risk-benefit calculations when she goes to the store with her 2-year-old daughter. Part of me is annoyed because bisphenol A is so pervasive, said Roberts, an associate professor of biology at Ursinus College in Pennsylvania. What do you do when your child wants the Dora the Explorer sippy cup made from polycarbonate plastic? I want to make her happy, but as a scientist, I'm really concerned about the low-dose effects of bisphenol A leaching from polycarbonate plastic. Industry trade groups, however, say the benefits of the chemical far outweigh any risks. Human exposure to bisphenol A from the use of protective liners for food cans is exceedingly low, hundreds to even 1,000 or more times lower than safe exposure levels set by U.S. and international regulatory agencies, said Dr. William Hoyle, who works for the Inter-Industry Group for Light Metal Packaging. As for polycarbonate plastics, it's the same story. Daily intake is well below the standard set by the European Food Safety Authority, said Dr. Steve Henges, who works for the BPA Global Group of the American Chemistry Council. Every authority that has looked at this has come to the same reassuring conclusion, Henges told me. But according to Dr. Fred von Saal and other frontline researchers of bisphenol A, the safe exposure levels described by Hoyle and Henges are absolutely meaningless. First of all, they fail to consider the scores of studies showing adverse effects at low doses. While a billionth of a gram may seem like an incredibly small amount, bisphenol A in human cells causes effects at the low part per billion level, said von Saal. Beyond that, biomonitoring studies of bisphenol A in human blood suggest that people already are being exposed to levels that far surpass the current government reference. So in order to account for the levels detected, people must be exposed to 10 times more than the current acceptable daily intake level. The leaders of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce were so dismayed by the FDA's recent approval of bisphenol A for use in products intended for infants and children that they launched an investigation in April 2008. And one of the first things that came out was that the studies that the FDA based its approval on were very large industry-funded studies. They didn't take into account any of the independent research that's being done all over the world. Whoops, okay, I'm done with those, that's okay. We're at a moment when bisphenol A is on the ropes in Congress. There's a bill pending, that's been introduced that would ban BPA. It's on the ropes in state legislatures and with city and county governments who are acting because the federal government has not acted. And it's definitely on the ropes in the mind of worried consumers who have demanded bisphenol A-free baby bottles and sport water bottles, and they're getting them. But remember a moment ago I said that bisphenol A is one of the most widely produced chemicals in the world? Well, the chemical industry is working very hard to make sure that BPA continues to be used in spite of the mounting evidence of its hazards. In fact, earlier this summer, minutes from a strategy session held in Washington, D.C. were leaked to the media. And this was a gathering of folks from Coca-Cola and Alcoa and industry trade groups like the American Chemistry Council. And the minutes detailed a number of shenanigans that were under discussion to prolong the life of bisphenol A, and some of them sounded straight out of the playbook of the tobacco industry. One of the tactics under consideration was an idea to find a pregnant woman, already a mom, who would be willing to speak around the country about the benefits of the chemical. So at this point, you might wonder, where are the regulators? Why hasn't the FDA or the EPA done something about restricting or banning this chemical? Well, the short answer is this. Bisphenol A and other endocrine-disrupting chemicals produce effects that aren't predicted by the toxicology models relied on by regulators. In fact, the low-dose effects of these substances make the old adage, the dose makes the poison, pretty meaningless. So essentially, this means that traditional risk assessments for endocrine-disrupting chemicals are inadequate for determining what you all care about most, and that is, what's a safe dose?